Hello, and welcome to the To Be Like Christ Bible Study podcast, where we explore and explain the Bible one chapter at a time. My name is Luke, and I am your host. And today's chapter is Genesis 2. Let's read the text together. I'm going to be reading from the English Standard Version of the Bible, and while I find it in my Bible, you may want to grab yours or grab your phone, pull it up on an app. If you have a moment while you're waiting for me, hit the subscribe button on your podcast player so that we can study together again sometime. It's the second day of 2025, and we are in the second chapter of Genesis. Let's read Genesis 2 together. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the hosts of them. And on the seventh day God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens, when no bush of the field was yet in the land, and no small plant of the field had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not caused it to rain on the land, and there was no man to work the ground. And a mist was going up from the land and was watering the whole face of the ground. Then the Lord God formed the man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living creature. And the Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground the Lord God made to spring up every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life was in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. A river flowed out of Eden to water the garden, and there it divided and became 4 rivers. The name of the first is the Pishon. It is the one that flowed around the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. Bdellium and onyx stones are there. The name of the second river is the Gihon. It is the one that flowed around the whole land of Cush. And the name of the third river is the Tigris, which flows east of Assyria. And the fourth river is the Euphrates. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, "You may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die." Then the Lord God said, "It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him." Now out of the ground the Lord God had formed every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens, and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called every living creature, that was its name. The man gave names to all the livestock, and to the birds of the heavens, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helper fit for him. So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and while he slept, took one of his ribs and closed up its place with flesh. And the rib that the Lord God had taken from the man he made into a woman, and brought her to the man. Then the man said, "This at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother, and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And the man and his wife were both naked, and were not ashamed." That's our reading for today in the second chapter of Genesis. Now, let's break down what we just read, talk about it, understand it, and then try to apply it. As I mentioned in our first podcast episode, I am getting all of this information from our free PDFs that you can download for yourself, the same exact thing that I'm reading off of on our website. There's a link in the description. The website is tobelikechrist.com, and we have been trying to create these outlines for every chapter of the Bible. At this time, we have them for like the first 10 books of the Bible and also the book of Psalms, and they are being created as we complete our 5-minute Bible studies in video form on our YouTube channel. So if you want to know the latest in terms of where we are in the creation of these things, check out the YouTube channel and see where I am in those videos. But let's talk Genesis chapter 2. When did the events of this chapter take place? Well, we've skipped a total of 6 days. We've passed 6 days on Earth. The universe has been in existence 6 days at this point, because you remember we talked about the 6 days of God's creation in Genesis chapter 1. So God's creation of our world marks the beginning of time as we know it and as we understand it. So we are now on the 7th day that the universe exists. As far as our main characters, our key figures here, we have God, number one. We talked about him in the first chapter. He's the creator of the universe, the earth, animals, man, and now we see he's creating a companion for man, woman. We have the first man, who we don't have a name for him in this chapter, but we're going to find out that his name is Adam. God created man from the dust of the ground. And then we have the first woman, who we'll find out her name is Eve. God creates the woman from a rib that's taken from the man. There's a common myth that if you cut open surgically a man and cut open a woman, you'll find that the man has one less rib than the woman, which I believe is just kind of an urban legend. I think anatomically speaking, that is not correct, but maybe you've heard that somewhere. I know, and I think when I was younger, I even believed that, but I'll save you from saying that to somebody and them raising their eyebrows at you. Now, in our third section, we always talk about our geography. Where did these events happen? And this is a pretty hard one for Genesis chapter 2. God created the first man and woman, and he put them in a garden that we're told is in the east of Eden. Now, no one knows for sure where God planted this garden. People have been trying to figure it out for generations, but nobody knows. And part of that is because the world has probably radically changed since its creation. Changed because of a number of factors. I mean, just time and decay, and even things that were built a couple generations ago where you live, are no longer in existence, have been torn down. Natural things that existed there once have completely disappeared, and you would never know that they were there. Obviously, that time and decay happens, but also what we're going to find out is there's a global flood that happens to the earth between the creation of Eden, this garden, and our time, which probably radically changed the face of the earth. So I don't know if it's a fruitless task to try to figure out where the Garden of Eden was. We can use contextual clues, which we're going to look at in just a second, but I don't particularly hold out a whole lot of hope for finding the exact place where Eden was. It also may be the case that God has just kept it from us, probably for our own good. Now, we do have a couple hints in the chapter, and that's the name of the 4 rivers that flowed from Eden: the Pishon, the Gihon, the Tigris, and the Euphrates River. You may notice, or if you're familiar with the Middle East, or if you've ever looked at a Bible map before, you've probably seen the names Tigris and Euphrates. To this day, there are two rivers that have those names, and it's very possible that the Garden of Eden was somewhere over in that area, and that these names, Tigris and Euphrates, have just passed down through history. I think that gives us another key point to discuss, and that is that the Bible, when it talks about places and names and events and people who existed in history, it's talking about real people. These aren't myths. These aren't fairy tales. They're not made-up names. It's actual. These are actual places. And as you read through the Bible, both the Old and the New Testament, what you'll find is that the Bible is talking about real historical events. And the more archaeologists and historians look into the Bible and its historical accuracy, what we find is that's true. And that the people who wrote the Bible were educated and that they were right about the things that they wrote about. So if this is your first time picking up the Bible, it's not like picking up just a piece of fictional literature from a pagan culture or something like that. No, this is actual history. And I would encourage you to study the historicity of the Bible, maybe alongside a study like this, because it will just further and further prove to you that the Bible is legitimate. It's not like some of these other phony books out there. So now we want to look at an outline of this chapter and try to break down what we just read to understand it. And then at the end, we'll take away our application. So I've got a couple sections here. I think this chapter breaks down somewhat nicely. The first section is talking about day number 7. So we had 6 days of creation, but after God finished his creation in 6 days, it says that God rested on the 7th day. Now, that's not because he was tired or he needed the day off. God is all powerful. He never runs out of energy. He just created, an incredible universe in 6 days. It's not like he's drained of all of his stamina by day number 7. No, he actually does this to set an example and to set a precedent for us, for his created beings. God blesses this 7th day and he makes it holy. And we're going to see the sacredness of the 7th day and some of the laws that God gives to his people later on in the Old Testament. I won't spoil that for you. Now that's section number 1. In section number 2, verses 4 through 7, we see the creation of man. So chapter 2 gives us more details about how God created men and women, and also how he created some of the details of the creation. Some critics of the Bible will try to frame up Genesis chapter 2 as if it's another creation story, like it's contradictory to Genesis chapter 1. But I think people do that, the people who usually do that and who parrot that criticism of the scriptures are often people who want to undermine the Bible, and they look at the Bible with the most negative eye. I think people who look at these scriptures and the goal is to look at them fairly will find that Genesis chapter 2 is just a complement to Genesis chapter 1, giving us another window, some more insights into how exactly everything played out. So in Genesis 2, we have some more details about how God created men and women. Those details aren't given to us specifically in chapter 1. So this is a complement. Man was created from the dust of the ground, and God gave him a soul by breathing life into his nostrils. This is really interesting because it's not said about any of the other animals that they receive this soul. What exactly is the soul? Well, we can't go into it in extreme detail, but this is a supernatural part of the human being. So it's the supernatural, the eternal, the spiritual inside of a physical body. So the soul is within our bodies, and it remains with us while we're here on earth. Every human being has this soul, and this soul, we find out from the Bible, is going to live on past our physical body. So the physical body is going to get worn out. Eventually everybody dies. We return to the dust from which we were made, but the soul continues. Section number 2 is the Garden of Eden, verses 8 through 17. We're told that God planted a garden in the east in Eden and put the man in it. And to feed the man, God caused all kinds of trees to grow in that garden. Now, there are 2 special trees that were put in the garden that will be talked about some more. There's apple trees and orange trees, but these 2 are the special ones. The tree of life, which we find out allows men to live forever if they eat from it. Now, this tree of life, store this one away in your mind because we're going to find it again in chapter 3. We're also going to find it in the very last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation. And then there's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This is the one that's going to be immediately relevant to our story as we get into chapter 3. So the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and that's the one that the man was told that he was not allowed to eat from or else he would die. We're also told about these 4 rivers, which we mentioned, the Pishon, the Gihon, the Tigris, and the Euphrates River. And then our final section, verses 18 through 25, the creation of woman and the naming of all of the animals. God saw that the man was alone, and God determined that he needed a companion. The other animals had companions, but the man didn't. All of the animals were brought to the man and presented before him, and he gives them all names, but none of the animals were a suitable companion for him. So God caused the man to fall asleep, and while he slept, God took one of his ribs and formed a female, a woman, And this woman was, according to God, the perfect companion for the man, and the man was very happy with the woman that God had created for him. Now, why does God do this by taking a rib out of man? I'll be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure. Maybe there are other texts of the Bible which give us clarity about why he chooses to do it this way. Maybe there's some hints in the Hebrew language, the original language in which the Old Testament was written. I don't know exactly why God chose to do it this way. And sometimes we're going to run into situations like that where we don't exactly know why God does the things that he does. And God doesn't feel the need to explain them to us. But it should be expected that God is going to do things a little differently than we do them because he's a being that's so superior to us, and yet doesn't necessarily owe us an explanation of everything he does and why he does it in the way that he does it. God designed men and women to leave their parents and to be joined to a companion as one flesh. Now, this is told to us for the benefit of the future generations, right? Obviously, Adam and Eve, they don't have parents. They were made from dust and from a rib. But we're told here about this institution of marriage, the unity between the man and the woman and the way that that is supposed to play out. And it says that they become one flesh together. Now, the final detail of chapter 2 is quite important. It will be in the next chapter as well, and it's very interesting. What we have here is a world where no one has ever done anything wrong. There's no sin, as we will talk about. Sin is trespassing God's law. It's doing things that God wouldn't approve of, doing things that corrupt this great creation that God has just made. But there's no sin in the world at this point. No one's ever done anything wrong or disobeyed God. And there's no shame, which is interesting. You know, when you do something wrong, you're ashamed of it, right? But there's no shame at this point in the Garden of Eden and between the man and the woman. And one of the things that they're not ashamed about was that they were naked. They weren't wearing clothing, and they weren't ashamed of being naked. It's a pretty universal thing that people don't walk around naked because there's something within us, built into us, that's not right, and that's something to be ashamed of. Maybe our cultures are losing that, the way that some of our people are dressing nowadays, right? But there should be in our modern world a shame with walking around naked. But in this perfect world without sin, that was not the case. So we'll pick up on our story here next time in Genesis chapter 3, and we'll talk about some of these details that we've highlighted. Now, thinking about an application for today, I want to focus on this institution of marriage. It's God who created the union between man and woman. A man is, according to God, according to the all-powerful, all-knowing creator of the universe, the perfect companion for a woman. And a woman is the perfect companion for a man. Marriage is an institution that is defined and designed by God. He created it. He gets to say what it is. It's not a man-made institution that we can just redefine with our laws or with our popular opinion. And why is this important? Well, it's important because many people in our modern world are trying to redefine marriage. They're trying to redefine what this partnership looks like. And they're saying, well, a man might be maybe he needs another male as a partner, or a female might need another female as a partner. Unfortunately, I think there's going to be some people in the future who are saying, well, the perfect companion for me is an animal. Well, what have we found out from what God has told us here? Very clearly, in the very beginning, we see a man, we see a woman, we see God saying that those are the perfect companions for one another. And that's not something that we get to debate about or we get to question God on. We're going to see that consistently confirmed throughout the rest of the Bible. God has created man for woman and woman for man to be joined together as one flesh in this institution of marriage. I think it's also significant here that we see a binary set of genders, which again, it's unfortunate that we have to talk about this, but we have people nowadays who are wanting to confuse this issue, or, what's a man, what's a woman? We can't even know. No, it's very clear in the text that God created the genders very distinctly and to be joined together. That is the way that God's perfect creation is intended to work. And anyone who's trying to twist that or distort that is ultimately fighting against God and trying to twist and warp the perfect creation that we've seen come into existence in Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2. So that is our study for today. That's our application. And I hope to see everyone again for Genesis chapter 3 as we talk about an unfortunate situation where the first sin enters into the world. The first corruption, the first disobedience enters into this perfect creation. We didn't get to keep the perfect creation for very long, just 2 chapters of the Bible, but chapter 3 introduces us to the problem that all human beings are going to face moving forward, and the problem that keeps us separated from God and puts us in danger, puts our soul, that spiritual part of us, in danger of being separated from God forever. So more on that tomorrow. I hope everyone has a fantastic day. And if you haven't already, remember to follow and subscribe to the podcast as we take this journey through one chapter of the Bible every day.